Hi, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. Now, getting your property let is pretty key to being a successful property investor. So this week, we're going to give you all our tips, tricks, and ways to level up your game so you can get your property let as quickly as possible for the most money as possible each and every time.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday property investors come to be informed and inspired. Getting your property let is the last step in a long process, and without doing it, you don't have any money coming in. So it's pretty important, and even more important to get it right now with the world being as it is. We've been letting out property ourselves and running a letting agent for many years now. So stick around because we've got a lot of battle-tested tips heading your way.
So it's time for our news story of the week, and the headline reads this week: MP launches bill to outlaw pet discrimination by landlords. Rob, how are landlords discriminating pets, and what is this bill, and should we be worried?
Well, this was only the first reading of a bill, which means it's all broad strokes and the detail hasn't been thrashed out yet. But it seems like the aim is to get rid of blanket no pets clauses in tenancy agreements and make landlords at least consider tenants with pets. So at the moment, you're allowed to say no pets, and that's it. And if anyone applies who's got pets, you can just say a straight no. It seems like the aim of this bill is to stop you from doing that. So in theory, you have to consider someone in exactly the same way you would consider anyone else, regardless of whether or not they've got a pet. It won't surprise you to learn that landlords have got very upset about this. And there's been a lot of conversation around this over the last couple of weeks, including people quite rightly pointing out that this isn't compatible with the 5-week deposit cap. So you now can't charge more than 5 weeks of rent as a deposit, regardless of any potential damage. Previously, people used to charge a higher deposit when a tenant had pets because they were anticipating that there could be more wear and tear on the property. Now you can't do that, so surprise, surprise, fewer landlords are willing to take pets, and so now landlords are being forced to take pets and in some cases don't like the idea of it very much. So early days on this one still, but lots of discussion around it and lots of anger about it.
Yeah, I can't believe this, Rob. It's a news story that is... Sorry, it's a terrible pun. But the news story itself does surprise me. Well, it doesn't anymore because, as you mentioned, that deposit cap really makes this very difficult for landlords and investors to implement this. I understand why landlords will want the option to choose. And and at the moment, it's an opportunity for those landlords who do say, I will take on pets. You know, the chances of them getting their properties let that little bit faster and possibly for more money is there as well. So there is a market for those landlords who are a bit more flexible with the tenancy arrangements they're willing to offer. If you want to discuss this news story, then head over to the Property Hub forum. There's a thread been started around this subject. Let us know your views, but I can't imagine things getting a little bit catty. And another headline that we'll discuss next week, amongst many others, is 200,000 people are set to miss out on a stamp duty holiday as a surge in demand creates a bottleneck. That's a big news story, and we've got loads of other big news stories to cover on the November market update, which will be with you this time next week. So make sure you listen out for that one.
You do all the hard work of getting the funds together, viewing properties, going through that painful conveyancing process that we talked about a few weeks back, doing any works you need to do to get the property up to scratch, and yet it all counts for nothing if you can't get that property let. Getting a property let quickly at the right price to the right tenant is always challenging and super important, but it's even more challenging and even more important to get everything right at the moment, given the situation we're in with social distancing and local lockdowns. But let's see how we can turn this into an opportunity. With the world being how it is right now, we have to work even harder and get a bit cleverer. But if we can figure all this out now, we'll be in an even stronger position if we keep doing that when the world gets back to normal. So in this episode, if you've got a property to let right now, or if you've got tenants who've just given notice, you're thinking, no, how am I going to get this relet? We'll have lots of ideas to help you out. And even if you don't, all of this will still be relevant in the future.
Alrighty, so let's get that property let. Well, before we do, let's slow down a bit and let's make sure we get it set up correctly. So first of all, you really need to understand your market. Who are you letting to? So if you have a house in the suburbs, it might not be young professionals as your market. It might be, but it's unlikely. Just as if you've got a one-bed apartment in a city centre, you're probably not marketing to families. I know it sounds obvious, but the decisions you make from this point on should reflect that. So, for example, if you are a person who lives in a suburb, in a family home, and you are getting your property to let in the city centre, that's a one-bed, don't set it up for yourself. Set it up for your market in mind. And that begins with, do you finish the property or not? Normally in a city centre, you will furnish a property. If you can get away with not doing it, fantastic. But if the market dictates that you need to furnish that property, then furnish it. You might think you're saving yourself a few quid by not finishing that property, but if you're waiting weeks and possibly months to get it let because you refuse to finish it, then it's costing you a lot more opportunity cost of the rent not coming in, but also potentially mortgage costs and service charges. So make sure you understand your market, but don't overspend as well. A family home in the suburbs potentially may not need furnishing, so don't go to the expense of furnishing a whole house when people might want to move their own stuff in. So just be conscious of that. Get that decision right early on, because otherwise you could be making a costly mistake.
So you've got to get the property right, of course, but you've also got to get the price right. And this is always important, but it's even more important right now. Now is not the time to be greedy. Tenants know at the moment that they have the balance of power. So if you overprice, you are going to struggle. And given that there have been some pretty major shifts recently, the rent that you've been charging before may not be appropriate anymore. And that might mean you have to charge less, or it could mean you have to charge more. But if you've always just been going for the same amount, now is the time to reassess. Look at what your competition is doing. It's all there on Rightmove and Zoopla. Just go and look at what other similar properties are renting for so you can position yourself accordingly. I did this recently. I had a property become empty and I dropped the rent by £50 a month. I don't know if I had to. The market wasn't saying I definitely needed to, but I was aware that it was a difficult time. And as it turned out, I ended up getting multiple strong offers inside a couple of days based just off video viewings. So that price cut has cost me £600 a year, but if I'd been anchored to that previous price and refused to take any less because psychologically didn't want to be going backwards, then it could easily have ended up costing me a lot more because of the property sitting empty. So that advice is relevant at any time, but now more than ever.
Definitely, Rob. And don't be relying on your agent to be telling you the price changes. They may be a great agent and assess the market all the time, but they might not. So don't rely on them. It won't take you that long to do a bit of research. And you might be pleasantly surprised. The market might be very strong at where your property is, stronger than you'd anticipated. Or, like in Rob's case, you may need to soften the level that you're after just to get it let quickly. But the opportunity cost, again, can be much worse than holding on to that high rental figure. And that's why working with your agent and closely with your agent is so important if you don't self-manage. Have conversations with them about the local market. Do your own research as well, validate what they're saying, and together work out a strategy for your property right now. Because during a lockdown or any time, the market is always changing. Because obviously with a lockdown situation, it's a turbulent market. But markets are also seasonal as well. So when your property becomes vacant, whether it's in a lockdown or any time of the year, you're going to need the right strategy. If your property's in a city centre, for example, in the summer, you may be able to get a slightly stronger rent because students may be coming to that city. In the suburbs, the new year may be a great time to let as people make different life decisions and want to move on. But at other points of the year, the market may soften and you may need to take a little bit less. Of course, in the current climate, your strategy is now more important than ever. So an example of this would be that previously we'd say block viewings are quite a good strategy to create interest. You have lots of people look at the property at once. That generates excitement, which may in turn generate a bit of competition, which helps your property get really quickly and possibly even for more money. Of course, in the world that we live in today, lots of people going to your property at once isn't going to happen because of all the restrictions in place. So you need to look at different ways to generate interest. And that's why getting your market strategy right is so important. It's important in any climate, but right now, if you're not on top of your game, it could hurt you.
Yeah, marketing is super important. The most important part of that marketing is photos. It's photos that catch people's attention in the first place and get them to click. If they don't click, they're never going to be able to find out about your property and inquire about it. So you've got to get that click by having appealing photos. Any money that you spend on getting great photos is an investment, not a cost. You can keep on using them over and over again, and it will make a really big difference. It's also particularly important at the moment to have the right photos, because it might be the case that potential tenants don't end up viewing the property at all before they move in, or they might only be going to view properties that they feel really confident about. So you don't want to just have 10 photos of the same room or the outside, and you don't want to get super arty and just have a load of close-ups of vases and things like that. You want to have the right photos that show off every room and really give the viewer what they need to know if that property is suitable for them. Of course, show it off in its best light, but there's no point just not showing photos of a couple of rooms that don't look particularly good, because it will come back and bite you later. And to take that a step further up, there's video tours, which used to be the exception, now are becoming the norm, and we've actually let a lot of properties off video tours alone.
Yeah, video tours are no longer that creative extra that you're doing that no one else is. We're at a point now where video tours are becoming almost essential. If you haven't got a video tour, then you're going to struggle. Now, it doesn't need to be a Hollywood blockbuster. It can be as simple as walking around your home with an iPhone and just taking a quick video, walking through the rooms. You can take it a step further if you want and add a little bit of commentary if you feel confident enough or your agent feels confident enough. But just get that video made because it just helps people. If people watch that video and then book on for a viewing, the conversion rate is going to go up. We've seen that through Property Hub Lets, that the people who've watched the videos, and we've made sure that they have, and then turn up, are far better prospects than before. Because before you looked at a few photos, got a mild sense of what it would be like, and then turned up, and then you'd be like, oh, well, this aspect wasn't what I was expecting, or, oh, I didn't realise that this room was actually that size. Whereas a video tour will give a much better sense of the feel of the property. Now, you can really take this as far as you want, the way you can have properly produced videos, and you can even get 3D tours done. There is really no limit. But in most cases, the basics will be enough here. But you must now do the basics, because you can't do your block viewings, as we've talked about. So you need to up your game in other areas, and this is one of those places that you can get yourself an advantage.
So the visuals are important, but the text is important as well. Not as important, I don't think. If you had to choose, you'd have great photos, but great text helps as well. And when I say great text, I don't mean it has to be a wonderful work of literature. It just needs to have the right information. At a time when tenants have got lots of choice, they're not going to bother trying to guess things like how many bathrooms there are, or if there's parking and things like that. If they're not sure that a property meets their needs, they'll close the tab and be on to the next one. So the job of the text is just to spell everything out really clearly, everything that they could possibly want to know. Now, because, as Rob mentioned earlier, you should know who you're marketing to, you should know what type of person is likely to want to move in, you can then tailor that to appeal to them. So, to be generic, if it's a family, you'll probably want to say something about local schools. If it's young professionals, you might be mentioning transport links. I'm sure you can get far more creative than that, but that's just to give you a really obvious example. So if you pair great photos with a video and with great text, then you should be getting lots of interest. As I've said, you might be able to convert that into an application without them actually viewing the property at all. That is happening a surprising amount. But a lot of people will still, understandably, want to come and actually view the property for themselves. If they do want to do that, Rob, pretty important that they actually can.
Yeah, it's crazy, but you actually need to make yourself available, or your agent needs to make themselves available with flexibility. So if you are only offering one time during the week for a viewing, then you may find a prospective tenant who's super flexible and will adapt to your needs and really wants the property, so we'll make that happen. But chances are they've probably got a few properties in mind, yours being one of them, and if they can't get in to see your property and your competition is being flexible and offering multiple times for them to come and see the property, guess who's going to win? So offering flexibility with viewings is really, really important. Of course, you can't be available 24/7 and neither can any letting agent. But if they can be adaptable and offer a few different times, then that's going to make the difference. Of course, Rob, if the property is tenanted, then it makes life a little bit more difficult. It makes it more difficult in any circumstance. But again, we keep referencing the fact that we're living in a COVID world right now. But we are, so we have to work with this. And understandably, tenants might not be as flexible as you'd like if your property is tenanted.
No, always a challenge to get access. Nobody likes having strangers traipsing through their home at inconvenient times. With things being as they are now, some people will use it as an excuse to be even more difficult about giving access. Others will genuinely have reason to be very concerned about it. So this is a difficult one to suddenly rectify now. You can't just magic up a good relationship overnight, but it shows the importance of having a good relationship with your tenants the whole way through, because then they are far more likely to be accommodating when the time comes. You can also ask your current tenants to film a video tour for you. We've done that in some cases and they're happy to, because they're aware that that'll filter out people who otherwise would have wanted to come straight round. And because filming stuff on a phone is so easy, that's not a difficult thing for them to do. So being on good terms with your tenants and getting flexibility for viewings, as with a lot of what we've talked about, you could classify it all as the basics, but doing those basics well has become even more important right now. But maybe depending on the market you're in and what the patterns of supply and demand are like, maybe those basics won't be enough. You might have to throw in a little bit of a wow factor.
Yeah, this is very much optional and don't feel like you have to do this, but if you want to create that wow factor, you can. What can you do to make yourself stand out beyond everything we've discussed already? Well, you can add a bit more. So, for example, you may want to provide free internet for whoever stays in your property. particularly if it's fast free internet. If you've got a particularly good deal, then having that in place for your tenants could be a real attraction. Not just the fact that it's included for the cost of their rent, but also they don't have the hassle of going to set it up, which if your tenant has moved once or twice before, they will know it is a pain in the backside. Could be that, it could be free Netflix. Use your imagination. It doesn't have to be super costly, but if you're trying to stand out from the market and you've got great photos, you've got great videos, and you're looking for that next step, well, you can consider things like this. You don't have to do it, but if you really want to add the wow, you can consider it.
So with all that done, hopefully the phone will start ringing and that property will be let within days. But if that's not the case, it's time to get proactive. Again, you should always be doing this, but if you are in a tough market, even more important now. The first thing to do is to chase for feedback from every viewing. Sometimes a viewing will end and it'll be clear that the property is not suitable for some reason, and they'll say what it is and that's fine. But sometimes it'll just be left hanging and you should chase up to find out what they thought. Also, if you've been sending out videos, follow up, see what they thought. 2 reasons for doing that. Firstly, you'll be gathering information which you can use to improve your marketing or actually improve the property. If you're hearing the same negative reception again and again, then you need to do something about it. The second reason is you can actually turn a maybe into a yes. It could easily be the case that you've got someone on the fence and they wouldn't have otherwise got in touch, but by getting on the phone with them, you can have a bit of a conversation, maybe have a bit of a negotiation and give them the push that they need to end up putting an application in. So you should always be getting feedback. And when you get that feedback, you should react quickly to it. If everyone's giving the same reason for not going ahead, it could be something subtle or it might be something as obvious as, I think I can get cheaper elsewhere. Then if the first 5 people have said that, it's unlikely that that's going to change. So respond quickly to that. You can't deny reality. And that includes the type of feedback where you get no feedback. If you put your advert up and the phone doesn't ring, that means something's wrong. If you don't get a response straight away, it's unlikely that everyone's suddenly going to notice your advert a couple of weeks later. If you haven't got the results you want within a week, make some changes. It's either going to be the photos, it's going to be the text, or it's going to be the price. You might want to go straight for the price, or you might decide to tweak the photos and the description first, give it another week, and then look at the price. But whatever you do, you want to start doing something quickly, because hoping that something's magically going to change is never a good strategy.
The great thing about any challenge or difficult period is that you can learn from it and become better. And lockdown, you could say, wow, I'm really having to work harder than ever before. But you're just sharpening up what you're doing. You're becoming better at your trade. You could have done all this before lockdown. And imagine if you had, you'd be way ahead. But okay, now it's been forced upon you. But use this to understand that, yeah, you're going to up your game now, and you need to up your game now. But why only do this when there's a crisis, when there's a more difficult period? If you operate this way all the time, I'm not saying looking at it day by day, but just every year, just think, okay, what can I do this year to make my properties stand out? If you adapt that mindset, that what you do right now is not good enough for the future, then you're always going to be ahead of your competition. So, yeah, it's been forced upon you now. And yes, these are great tools and tactics that you can introduce to make sure you're right up there with the competition. But don't stop there. Constantly up your game. It takes a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, but it will really pay off in every sense.
Time now to share a bit of your success. We love doing this. There are so many wonderful, inspiring things that listeners of this podcast are up to, and it's so good to be able to share them with everyone else. This week's success story comes in the form of a 5-star review of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and we happen to love that form, so thank you to Don for sending that in. And saying, Rob and Rob have given me so much info and confidence with their podcasts over the last year or so. I'm an accidental landlord that's decided to make a serious business now, and this podcast has helped me achieve that. I'm just about to buy my first property in a limited company, and I'm excited to get a few more properties before the year is up. Thank you, Don, and that's so good to hear. We've said multiple times over the last couple of years how accidental landlords are likely to struggle in coming years. Properties become something that you have to take seriously. You have to treat it like a business, and you have got that choice to make about whether that's something that you want to do, if that's a journey you're up for. And clearly, in Don's case, it is. He's decided to get serious and actually buy more. So that's really, really good to hear. If you've got a success story of your own, we'd love to hear it. You have our full permission to boast and show off. You can do that in a review of the podcast, or you can find us on the socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Property Hub UK.
Okay, so it's time for Hub Extra, the part of the show where we give you more. And this is all backed up by an email that goes out every single Friday. But if you want that email, well, it's easy. If you're not getting it already, head over to propertyhub.net and sign up for a free account, where not only will you get the Hub Extra email land in your inbox every Friday, but you'll get access to loads of free education, course after course. There's so much on there that we'd need a whole podcast to run through it. But just take my word for it, it is an incredible value for the cost of nothing. And this week on Hub Extra, I want to recommend to you a couple of books. A friend of mine recently was going for a very senior position within a business, and he wanted some books to help him really up his game as a business leader. So these two books I'd highly recommend to anybody who runs a business, is high up in a business, or wants to understand business, or maybe one day wants to set up your own business. The two books I'd recommend are Rockefeller Habits and Delivering Happiness. Now, they are very different books. Rockefeller Habits will give you a framework for how you should run a business day to day, week to week, month to month. It's absolutely fantastic. But of course, running a business is only part of it. And something that we really believe is super important is delivering an incredible service. And the book Delivering Happiness will really guide you on your way to giving you ideas and inspiration on how you can deliver a great service within your business. Now, you might be listening to this and going, Rob, this is a property podcast. Why are you talking about business? Well, property is a business. And particularly if you level up onto a few properties, you really need to get your head around delivering a great service and also organising yourself and your property business. So these books are absolute essentials for anybody with an interest in business, but also as property investors, you may want to take a look as well.
Well, that is it for this week. Hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Hope you've picked up something useful from it. We will be back again, as always, next week with two more podcasts, the Property Podcast and Ask Rob and Rob. And to keep you busy in the meantime, we've got everything going on our social channels and plenty more on YouTube. Just search Property Hub UK. So thanks for joining us. Until we see you next, enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.